Maya's hands trembled as she watched the man in the expensive suit lean back in his chair, laughing. His voice carried across the restaurant floor, not in English, but in German. Smooth, confident, arrogant. She didn't understand the words, but she understood the tone. It was the sound of a man who thought he was invisible to people like her. What he didn't know was that the black waitress standing 3 feet away, the one he barely glanced at, understood every single word he was saying, and what she heard would change everything. But how did Maya find herself in this moment? How did a brilliant economics scholar end up serving overpriced steaks to billionaires who treated her like furniture? And what would she do when she finally had the chance to speak? This is a story about power, dignity, and one woman's refusal to stay silent. If you've ever felt invisible, this story is for you. Hit that subscribe button and ring the notification bell because you're about to witness something incredible. Now, let's go back to where it all began. The smell of expensive cologne mixed with truffle oil hung in the air of the Golden Table, Manhattan's most exclusive restaurant. This wasn't the kind of place where regular people ate. This was where deals worth millions got made over wine that cost more than most folks' monthly rent. And Maya Richardson? She was a ghost here. 26 years old, medium height, with natural curls pulled back into a neat bun. Maya moved through the dining room like water, smooth, quiet, invisible. She'd learned the choreography by heart. Pour water before the guest noticed their glass was empty. Remove plates the moment a fork touched porcelain. Smile, but not too much. Speak, but only when spoken to. Be invisible. That's what survival looked like at the Golden Table. Maya had been working there for 3 years. 3 long years of swallowing her pride, biting her tongue, and pretending she didn't notice the way some guests looked right through her, or worse, the way they looked at her, like she was something to be studied, questioned, doubted. "Where did you learn to speak such good English?" one regular had asked her once, his eyebrows raised in surprise. Maya had smiled politely. "Boston," she'd said, not mentioning her bachelor's degree from MIT, or the fact that she'd been accepted into a PhD program in Germany before her world fell apart. That was 3 years ago. 3 years since her father, Dr. James Richardson, had his stroke. 3 years since everything changed. Let me take you back, because you need to understand who Maya really was before the Golden Table became her prison. Dr. James Richardson wasn't just any scientist. He was a genius, a black biochemist who'd built something incredible, a company called Richardson Water Solutions. His invention? A water filtration system so efficient, so affordable, that it could bring clean drinking water to millions of people in underserved communities. Maya's mother, Sharon Richardson, was a nurse who'd met James at a medical conference. She'd fallen in love with his passion, his brilliance, and his vision of using science to help people who'd been forgotten. Maya grew up watching her father work late into the night, explaining complex chemical reactions while cooking Sunday dinner, turning everything into a teaching moment. By the time Maya was 16, she could discuss molecular structures and economic policy with equal ease. "Baby girl," her father used to say, "education is the one thing nobody can ever take from you. You put knowledge in your head, and it's yours forever." Maya took those words seriously. She'd graduated from MIT at 21 with a degree in economics. Then she'd done something unexpected. She'd moved to Germany to pursue her PhD at the University of Heidelberg. Her dissertation focused on how clean water access affected economic development in poor communities. It was her father's work that inspired her research. In Germany, Maya thrived. She learned to speak German fluently, not from an app, but from living there, studying there, debating economic theory with professors late into the night. She made friends. She built a life. And then the phone call came. Maya was in the university library when her phone buzzed. It was 3 a.m. in Boston. Her stomach dropped before she even answered. "Maya?" Her voice was thick with tears. "It's your father. He's had a stroke." The next 48 hours were a blur. Packing, flight, hospital, the smell of disinfectant that burned her nose and made her eyes water.
Her father lay in the hospital bed, half his face slack, unable to move, but his eyes were weak, aware, trapped in a body that wouldn't obey him anymore. "Dad?" Maya whispered, taking his hand. He squeezed her hand. It was the only thing he could do, but that squeeze said everything. "Don't leave me. Don't give up on me. Stay." The doctors talked about long-term care facilities, physical therapy, medications that cost more per month than most people made in 3 years. Maya's mother looked older than Maya had ever seen her, exhausted from working double shifts as a nurse while trying to care for her husband. "How did this happen?" Maya asked the neurologist. "He was healthy, he exercised, he ate right." The doctor hesitated. "Strokes can be triggered by extreme stress. Has your father been under unusual pressure recently?" That's when Maya learned the truth. Richardson Water Solutions had been targeted. A powerful investment firm called Blackwell Capital, run by a ruthless businessman named Grant Blackwell, had set their sights on her father's company. They'd started friendly, offering partnership, investment, support, but when Dr. Richardson refused to sell, things turned dark. Suddenly, reports started appearing questioning the safety of his water filtration technology. Anonymous sources claimed the system would fail within 5 years. Investors got nervous, funding dried up, banks called in loans. It was all lies, manufactured panic designed to tank the company's value. And then Blackwell Capital swooped in with a final offer. Buy the company for pennies on the dollar or watch it collapse entirely. Dr. Richardson had been forced to sign, and 1 week later, his body gave out under the weight of that betrayal. Maya stood in the hospital parking lot, phone pressed to her ear, talking to her PhD advisor in Germany. "I have to come home," she said. "My family needs me." "Maya, you're so close to finishing. Just 1 more year." "I can't," she interrupted, her voice cracked. "I can't be an ocean away while my father needs care, while my mother works herself to death trying to pay for it." There was a long silence on the other end. Finally, her advisor spoke gently. "I understand, but Maya, what will you do?" What would she do? She couldn't finish her PhD, her father's company was gone, the family savings were drained by medical bills. Her mother needed help. Maya did the math. Long-term care facilities cost thousands per month. Medications, physical therapy, specialized equipment, it all added up to a mountain of debt that kept growing. She needed money. Fast money. Steady money. That's how she ended up at the golden table. High-end restaurants paid well, especially in tips. One good night could equal a week's pay anywhere else. So Maya packed away her academic papers, put her German language skills in storage, and learned a new vocabulary. "Good evening. May I start you with sparkling water? The chef recommends the Dover sole with lemon butter." "Right away, sir." She became a ghost, invisible, just another black waitress in a sea of white tablecloths and crystal chandeliers. But here's the thing about being invisible. Sometimes people forget you can see them too. 3 years passed like water through a drain, fast and relentless. Maya's life became a brutal routine. Mornings at the care facility with her father, helping him with physical therapy exercises, reading to him from the economics textbooks she couldn't bear to throw away. Afternoons catching a few hours of sleep. Evenings at the golden table, moving through the dining room with practiced grace. Late nights on the subway, exhausted, counting tips in her head, calculating how many more shifts she needed to cover next month's expenses. Then home to her tiny studio apartment in Queens, collapsing into bed at 2 a.m., waking up at 8 a.m., to do it all again. Some nights, Maya would take out her old economics textbooks and read them like some people read the Bible, looking for hope, for meaning, for a reminder that her mind hadn't gone completely numb. She'd whispered German words to herself in the dark. Der Goldfisch, dis Goldfisches. She'd laugh at the absurdity, conjugating German nouns in a cramped New York apartment at 2 in the morning while her father lay in a care facility across town. But it kept her sharp. It reminded her of who she used to be. At the golden table, Maya became known for her precision. She could tell the difference between a guest tapping their teacup, they wanted lemon, or shifting their chair back slightly, they were about to stand and would need their coat. She could describe the difference between the pan-seared scallops and the butter-poached lobster in 3 languages. Not that anyone asked. Most guests didn't really see her. She was part of the scenery, like the marble statue in the corner or the crystal chandelier overhead. The manager, Richard Dubois, was one of the few who treated the staff like actual human beings. Silver-haired, sharp-eyed, Richard ran the golden table with an iron fist wrapped in velvet. He demanded perfection, but he also had his staff's backs. "Maya," he told her once, "I won't tolerate guests disrespecting my people. You ever feel unsafe, you come get me. Understood?" She'd nodded, grateful. But most nights passed without incident. Pour wine, serve food, clear plates, smile, collect tips, go home, repeat. Until the night Grant Blackwell walked through the door. It was a Thursday night in October. The restaurant was fully booked, every table filled with Manhattan's elite. Maya was assigned to the VIP section, the corner where the real power players sat. At exactly 8 p.m., the front door opened. Richard straightened immediately, like a soldier snapping to attention. Maya noticed his reaction and glanced towards the entrance. Grant Blackwell. She recognized him instantly from the news articles she'd read 3 years ago, from the photos that had haunted her during her father's worst days. Tall, imposing, in a suit that probably cost more than her yearly rent. Salt and pepper hair perfectly styled, jaw set like he was carved from granite. Next to him was a younger man, late 30s, quick to smile, his assistant probably, or protege. "Mr. Blackwell," Richard said smoothly, "your usual table is ready." Grant didn't acknowledge him with words, just a slight nod, like Richard was a well-trained dog. Maya's heart was pounding, but her face remained perfectly neutral. She picked up 2 bottles of sparkling water and walked toward their table. "Breathe," she told herself. "Just another table. Just another guest." "Good evening, gentlemen," she said,
her voice steady. "Still or sparkling water to start?" The younger man glanced up briefly. "San Pellegrino, 2 bottles." Grant Blackwell didn't even look at her. He was already talking, voice low and confident, describing some business deal like he was reading a grocery list. Cut 40% of the staff, kept the intellectual property, sold the server division in 3 weeks, 50% profit margin. His companion whistled low. Beautiful execution. Maya set down the water bottles and menus with practiced precision. "Tonight we have wild mushroom risotto with white truffle and Dover sole prepared tableside. I'm Maya, and I'll be taking care of you this evening." Grant's eyes flicked up to her face for exactly half a second. Not long enough to remember her, just long enough to register that she existed. Then he went back to his conversation. Maya stepped away, her hand steady, her expression unchanged. But inside, something was starting to burn. Maya returned to their table with a breadbasket. As she approached, she heard the language at the table change. German. Her steps didn't falter, but every nerve in her body went on high alert. Grant was speaking German to his companion now, voice lowered, clearly believing they were having a private conversation in a language the staff wouldn't understand. Maya gave no sign that she understood. She set down the bread, offered a small smile, and walked away as if oblivious. But she'd heard every word. They were talking about a deal, something about a tech company, panicking investors, and swooping in to buy at a fraction of the value. Grant's voice had that satisfied edge to it, like a cat that had just caught a particularly fat mouse. Maya's German was perfect, not textbook perfect, but fluent native speaker perfect. She'd lived in Heidelberg for 3 years. She'd debated economic policy with PhD students in campus bars. She'd read Rilke's poetry and argued about German philosophy at 2 a.m. But these men didn't know that. To them, she was just another waitress, another piece of furniture. When Maya returned to take their order, Grant barely glanced at the menu. Oysters Rockefeller, steak tartare, 2 bone-in ribeyes, medium rare, and a bottle of the 2005 Petrus. Don't bother with the tasting. Maya wrote it down. The Petrus alone cost $4,000. She tried not to think about how many months of her father's care that single bottle of wine could cover. "Excellent choice," she said smoothly. "I'll have that right out."
As she walked toward the wine cellar, Grant and his companion switched back to German. And that's when Maya heard the name that made her blood run cold. Project North Star, Grant said in German, his tone casual. That was a masterpiece. Maya's hand froze on the wine cellar door handle. North Star. She knew that name. She'd seen it in documents 3 years ago, mentioned in hushed phone calls her father had taken, written on torn memos she'd found in his office after the stroke. She forced herself to keep moving, to keep breathing, to get the wine. Don't react, she told herself. Not yet. Back at the table, Maya decanted the Petrus with steady hands. The wine flowed from bottle to decanter like blood, dark and rich. Grant and his companion continued their conversation in German, completely unguarded now. The key to North Star, Grant was saying in German, was making the old man believe every word we fed him, leak the right information to the right people, plant doubts about the technology's long-term viability. By the time we offered to buy, they were desperate. His companion, whose name Maya now knew was Evan Parker, chuckled. That technical report was genius. Nobody questioned it. Why would they? Grant said. We had Dr. Peterson's signature on it. A respected scientist saying the technology would fail within 5 years, never mind that it was complete fiction. Maya's hands didn't shake. Years of training kept her movements smooth and professional, but inside, her heart was hammering so hard she thought it might crack her ribs. Dr. Peterson. She knew that name too. He'd been her father's colleague once, before Blackwell Capital got to him. The best part, Evan continued in German, was watching the old man try to argue on scientific ethics, like ethics pay the bills. Both men laughed. Grant's eyes slid toward Maya as she poured his wine. Look at her standing there, he said in German, his tone dripping with contempt. Probably thinking about tip money for rent. These people are like furniture. They hear nothing, understand nothing, remember nothing. Evan raised his glass. To goldfish brains, he said in German, and they both laughed again. Maya finished pouring, stepped back the regulation distance, and stood with her hands folded, face completely neutral. Inside, something fundamental was shifting. For 3 years, she'd been invisible. For 3 years, she'd swallowed every indignity, every slight, every moment of being treated like she was less than human. She'd done it for her father, for her mother, for survival. But this was different. These men had destroyed her father. They'd stolen his life's work with lies and manipulation. They'd triggered the stroke that left him unable to speak, unable to walk, unable to live the life he'd built. And now they sat here, drinking $4,000 wine, laughing about it in German because they thought she was too stupid to understand. Something her father used to say echoed in her mind. Baby girl, sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is speak the truth when everyone expects you to stay silent. Maya took a slow, deep breath. She thought about her father lying in that care facility, fighting every day to regain movement in his fingers. She thought about her mother, exhausted from working double shifts. She thought about the dissertation she'd abandoned, the life she'd given up, the 3 years she'd spent being invisible. And then she thought about German grammar, specifically about how people who use a language to show off often make small mistakes. Grant Blackwell had said Gehirn eines Goldfisch, brain of a goldfish, but the genitive form was wrong. It should have been Gehirn des Goldfisch. No, wait, he'd gotten it wrong. The correct genitive of goldfish was des Goldfisches. A small mistake, the kind a native speaker wouldn't make, the kind that revealed someone was using a language as a weapon without fully mastering it. Maya smiled slightly.
Maya stood perfectly still, hands folded, face neutral. Inside, her heart was pounding like a drum. Grant Blackwell reached for his wine glass, still speaking German to Evan Parker, still laughing about how they destroyed her father's company, still thinking she couldn't understand a single word. Maya had a choice to make. She could stay silent, keep her job, keep the peace, keep being invisible. Or she could do something that would change everything. Her father's voice echoed in her mind. Sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is speak the truth when everyone expects you to stay silent. Maya took one slow, steady breath. And then she spoke. The main course arrived 15 minutes later. 2 bone-in ribeyes, sizzling with butter, fat glistening under the chandelier light. Maya carried them to the table herself, setting them down with practiced precision. But this time, she didn't step back. She stood there, spine straight, looking directly at Grant Blackwell. Grant frowned slightly, noticing for the first time that something was different. "Is there a problem?" he asked in English, his tone sharp. The surrounding tables went quiet. Richard Dubois, the manager, appeared at the edge of Maya's vision, sensing the shift in atmosphere. Maya could feel dozens of eyes turning toward her. The entire VIP section seemed to hold its breath. This was it, the moment that would change everything. Maya opened her mouth and spoke, not in English, but in perfect, flawless German. "Mr. Blackwell," she said, her voice steady and clear, "there is indeed a problem." Grant's fork stopped halfway to his mouth. Evan Parker choked on his wine, coughing so hard his face turned red. The power in the room shifted like a tectonic plate sliding into a new position. Maya didn't switch to English. She stayed in German, forcing them onto her territory now. "First," she continued in German, "a small correction. You said Gehirn eines Goldfisches, but the correct genitive form is des Goldfisches. If you're going to use a language to assert superiority, you should at least master the basics." You could have heard a pin drop. Grant Blackwell, a man who controlled millions of dollars, who had never been challenged in his life, sat there with his mouth slightly open, his face going from red to purple. The nearby tables had stopped eating. They might not have understood German, but they understood this. The waitress had just put the billionaire in his place. "Who the hell do you think you are?" Grant sputtered, finally finding his voice. He switched to English, trying to reclaim control. But Maya didn't give him that bridge. She stayed in German. "You want to know who I am?" she said, her voice cutting through the silence like a blade. "I'm someone whose concerns go far beyond tip money for rent." She paused, letting that sink in. "I'm someone who graduated at the top of her class from MIT, someone who studied economics at the University of Heidelberg, someone who speaks German fluently because I lived in your beloved Germany for 3 years." Grant's face had gone from red to purple. "But the name you should remember," Maya continued, her voice dropping lower, "isn't mine." She let the silence stretch for one perfect heartbeat. "I am Maya Richardson, daughter of Dr. James Richardson." The recognition hit Grant's face like a physical blow. He actually recoiled in his chair. "Richardson Water Solutions," Maya said clearly, still in German. "Project North Star. Does that ring any bells, Mr. Blackwell?" Evan Parker looked like he wanted to sink through the floor. He started, but the sentence died before it was born. Maya wasn't done. "You talked about North Star like it was some brilliant business move. Let me translate what it really was." Her voice was calm, professional, like she was presenting an academic paper. "North Star was a campaign of manufactured panic. You deliberately leaked false information. You paid Dr. Mark Peterson to sign a fake technical report claiming my father's technology would fail within 5 years. You spread lies until investors panicked and pulled their funding." She took a step closer to the table. "And when my father had no choice left, when he was forced to sign away his life's work for nothing, the stress triggered a massive stroke. 1 week after signing those papers, Mr. Blackwell. 1 week." Her voice cracked slightly on those last 2 words, but she pushed through. "My father is in a long-term care facility now. He can't speak, he can barely move his right side, but his mind is still sharp. He knows what you did to him." Maya looked at the bottle of Petrus on the table. "That wine you're drinking," she said softly. "Do you know how many months of my father's medical care it could cover? Do you have any idea what it costs to keep a stroke victim alive with dignity?" Grant Blackwell shot to his feet. His chair scraped back so hard it carved a line across the polished floor. "You're fired," he roared, his face twisted with rage. He looked around wildly for Richard Dubois. "Your employee just—" "My employee," Richard interrupted smoothly, stepping forward, just stood up for herself after being disrespected by a guest. In my establishment, Mr. Blackwell, I don't allow guests to abuse my staff. The entire restaurant was watching now. Forks hung in midair. Conversations had stopped. Even the kitchen had gone quiet. Richard's voice was firm. Perhaps it's time for you to leave. Grant looked around the room, seeing all those eyes watching him, judging him. Powerful people who now knew what he'd done, who just watched him get taken apart by a waitress speaking better German than he did. For a man like Grant Blackwell, there's nothing worse than public humiliation. "This isn't over," he snarled at Maya. She reached for the leather check presenter and placed it on the table beside his untouched ribeye. "Your check, Mr. Blackwell," she said in English now, her voice perfectly professional, "including the Petrus." It was the ultimate power move, presenting him with a $5,000 bill after destroying his dignity. Grant threw a wad of crumpled cash on the table, grabbed his coat, and stormed toward the door. Evan Parker followed behind him like a kicked dog. The restaurant doors swung shut behind them. For 2 heartbeats, there was absolute silence. And then, someone started clapping. It was soft at first, a woman at a nearby table. Then another person joined in, then another. Within seconds, the entire VIP section was applauding. Not loud or dramatic. This was the golden table after all. But the message was clear. They'd just witnessed something extraordinary.
Maya stood there, her armor finally cracking, tears she'd held back for 3 years suddenly burning in her eyes. Richard put a gentle hand on her shoulder. "Go to the kitchen," he said quietly. "Take a moment. You're not fired. You're not in trouble. Go." Maya nodded and walked toward the kitchen on legs that felt like water. The moment the kitchen door swung shut behind her, everything she'd been holding in finally broke free. Maya leaned against the cool stainless steel counter, her body shaking. Chef Antoine, the head chef, wordlessly handed her a glass of water. "Drink," he said simply. She drank, the cold water shocking her system back to steadiness. Richard appeared a moment later, giving her space but staying close enough to offer support. "You okay?" Maya nodded, not trusting her voice yet. "You're not getting fired," Richard said firmly. "I meant what I said out there. Nobody treats my people like that, not in my restaurant." "He's going to make trouble," Maya said finally, her voice hoarse. Richard shrugged. "Let him try. I've dealt with bigger problems than Grant Blackwell's wounded ego." The other kitchen staff and waiters had started to gather at the edges of the room, not crowding her, but not leaving her alone either. In a place where people usually had to fend for themselves, having the team stand with you meant everything. "What you did out there," Chef Antoine said quietly, "that took guts. Real guts." Maya managed a weak smile, or real stupidity. "Haven't decided which yet." "Both," Richard said with a slight smile. "The best moments usually are. Go ahead and take the rest of the night off. I'll handle everything here." Maya changed out of her uniform in the staff locker room, her hands still trembling slightly. In her locker, her old economics textbook sat like a faithful friend. She ran her fingers over the cover, remembering the person she used to be. Maybe, she thought, she was finding her way back to that person. What Maya didn't know was that someone else had been paying attention that night. Evelyn Shaw sat at a corner table, her phone in her lap, heart racing. Evelyn was an investigative reporter for the New York Chronicle. She'd been at the Golden Table meeting a source for a completely different story. But she just witnessed something much bigger. Evelyn didn't speak German, but she'd watched the entire confrontation. She'd seen Grant Blackwell's face change color. She'd seen the waitress speak with calm authority while a billionaire lost his composure. She'd seen a man who was used to controlling every room he entered get completely dismantled. And she'd recorded the whole thing on her phone. Not the German conversation, she'd only arrived for the end, but the explosive finish. The fired threat, Richard defending his employee, the check being presented, the stormed exit. Evelyn had reported on power dynamics for 15 years. She knew what she'd just seen. Power changing hands in real time. She didn't leave right away. Instead, she spoke quietly with two diners at a nearby table. A middle-aged couple who looked like they read the Financial Times every morning and donated to museum galas. "Did you understand what they were saying? The German part?" The woman leaned forward, her eyes bright. "Some of it. I studied in Berlin for a semester. I caught phrases like North Star, Schmidt, or was it Richardson? Something about a technical report and a board seat." The man added, "The waitress corrected his grammar. That was savage. You don't correct someone's German unless you're absolutely fluent." Evelyn made mental notes, her reporter's instinct firing on all cylinders. At the host stand, she handed her business card to the receptionist. "If the manager needs to reach me, I'm here." The receptionist, a young woman named Carmen, took the card without making promises. The golden table didn't like the press, but she nodded, a small gesture that cracked the door open just enough. Outside, Evelyn stood on the Manhattan sidewalk, the sounds of the city rushing around her. She pulled out her phone and reviewed her recording, making quick notes. Waitress speaks German. Names mentioned: North Star, Richardson or Schmidt, Peterson. Billionaire Grant Blackwell. Associate Evan Parker. Manager defended employee. She texted her editor. "Got a story. Big one. The Billionaire and the Waitress." The reply came back within seconds. "Write it. We run it tomorrow morning." Evelyn went straight to the newsroom. Back at the Chronicle offices, Evelyn started with public records. Grant Blackwell, Blackwell Capital, a history of aggressive takeovers and restructuring deals. Criticism for slashing jobs and extracting maximum profit. She moved to business databases. Richardson water filtration technology. Signs of financial trouble 3 years ago, followed by a quiet acquisition by Blackwell Capital. She dug deeper. Old press releases, industry forums, a financial analyst who'd once mentioned something called Project North Star in a leaked internal document. The pieces were starting to fit together. The missing piece was the waitress. Evelyn needed a name. She went back to the golden table the next morning during shift change. Carmen, the receptionist, recognized her. "I can't give you official information," Carmen said quietly, "but her name is Maya. That's all I can tell you." Maya. That was enough for a starting point. The Chronicle's research team went to work. Within an hour, they had 3 possible matches for servers named Maya working at high-end Manhattan restaurants. One match stood out. Maya Richardson, daughter of Dr. James Richardson, founder of Richardson Water Filtration Technology. Evelyn felt her pulse quicken. This wasn't just a story about a confrontation in a restaurant. This was about something much bigger. She drafted an email to Maya, keeping it brief and respectful. "Miss Richardson, I'm Evelyn Shaw, a reporter with the New York Chronicle. I was at the Golden Table last night. I'm writing about what happened, and I want to make sure your side of the story is told fairly. If you want to talk, I'm here. If not, I'll do my best to honor your privacy while reporting the truth." She hit send and waited. No reply came immediately. Evelyn didn't push. Instead, she wrote the story with what she had, being careful to verify every fact to separate observation from conclusion. The article she crafted focused on the scene itself, the power dynamic, the linguistic confrontation, the manager who defended his employee. She left 3 placeholders for the North Star and Richardson details she still needed to confirm. At 3 a.m., Evelyn filed her story. The editor replied at 3:10 a.m., running in the morning edition, 6:30 a.m. online, 7 a.m. print. The headline was simple but powerful. "The Billionaire and the Waitress. When speaking truth, costs everything. Evelyn dozed at her desk, coffee growing cold, knowing that when the sun came up, everything was about to change. At 6:32 a.m., the New York Chronicle's digital edition went live. By 7:05 a.m., the article was the top story on their homepage. By 8 a.m., it had been shared 5,000 times on social media. By 8:30 a.m., hashtag Golden Table Waitress was trending nationwide. The story exploded across the internet. People who'd felt invisible their whole lives saw themselves in Maya. Service workers who'd been talked down to, disrespected, treated like furniture, they all felt the power of watching someone finally speak up. The comments poured in. This is what courage looks like. She lost her job but kept her dignity. We need more people willing to speak truth to power. The hospitality industry community shared it as a case study in ethical management. Richard Dubois defending his employee became the gold standard for how restaurants should treat their staff. But the finance and tech community latched on to three words: North Star, Richardson, and Peterson. Those words were anchors pulling them deeper into something much bigger than a viral confrontation. At Blackwell Capital's offices, chaos erupted. Grant's PR team scrambled to contain the damage. They drafted a statement, an apology for inappropriate language, respect for service workers, lessons learned. But the statement carefully avoided mentioning North Star. The in-house legal counsel warned, "Don't touch it. If you acknowledge North Star, you open the door to liability." But the markets don't wait for legal advice. By 9:30 a.m., major investment accounts were calling, asking questions. If the Richardson story is true, if Blackwell Capital had used fabricated reports to tank a company's value, what did that mean for legal liability, for reputation, for future deals? At 9:47 a.m., an internal email went out. Emergency leadership meeting, 10:15 a.m. Begin with Evan Parker's situation.
Evan became the first piece thrown overboard. At 10:12 a.m., his phone buzzed with a text. "You're suspended, stay home, wait for instructions." Evan stared at the screen, unsurprised, but still stunned. He'd spent years learning the rules of power. The first rule, when things go wrong, the underlings get sacrificed first. At 10:30 a.m., Grant sat at the head of the boardroom table, surrounded by lawyers, executives, and board members who suddenly weren't returning his calls as quickly as they used to. "What's the damage assessment?" the CFO asked. "Significant," the PR director replied. "The story's everywhere, and people are digging into North Star." "Do we have exposure?" an independent director asked, her pen poised over her notepad. The lawyer cut in sharply. "Don't discuss specifics here. This conversation isn't privileged." Everyone went silent. In the world of corporate crisis management, that silence said everything.
Maya's phone wouldn't stop buzzing. Unknown numbers, text messages, emails flooding her inbox faster than she could read them. Reporters wanting interviews, strangers offering support, and one email that stood out from all the rest. Subject: Your Father's Legacy. From Robert Chen, CEO, Phoenix Holdings. Maya stared at the email for a full minute before opening it. Her hand trembled slightly as she clicked. "Miss Richardson, I once tried to partner with Richardson Water Solutions. Your father was a visionary. What happened to him was a tragedy that should never have occurred. I watched the news this morning. The intelligence and courage you displayed reminded me why I got into this business, to support people who care more than profit. Phoenix Holdings is launching an ethical innovation initiative. If you're interested in building something that matters, my door is open. This isn't charity. This is a job offer." Maya read it 3 times, her heart pounding. Was this real? Or was this another powerful man making promises he wouldn't keep? By 11 a.m., Evelyn Shaw published a follow-up article. She'd tracked down 3 former Richardson Water Solutions employees. 2 agreed to speak on condition of anonymity. One said, "There was a report that suddenly appeared. It claimed the technology would fail within 5 years, but none of us had ever seen that data. When we asked about it, we got shut down."
Another former employee added, Dr. Peterson's signature was on it. We trusted him. Looking back now, I don't think any of us actually verified the data ourselves. Evelyn tried calling Dr. Mark Peterson. No answer. But by noon, Peterson's personal lawyer was calling him with a message that would change everything. You need to talk. Now. Peterson sat in his home office, head in his hands. He'd been living with the guilt for 3 years. 3 years of watching his career prosper while James Richardson suffered. 3 years of pretending the money was worth it. It wasn't. His lawyer laid it out simply. The story's out. Federal regulators are going to start asking questions. You can be the subject of the investigation, or you can be the witness who helps. Your choice. Peterson closed his eyes and said, I want to cooperate. What he didn't know was that at that exact moment, at the Securities and Exchange Commission offices downtown, an analyst had already flagged the New York Chronicle article. A message pinged across internal systems. Check acquisitions 3 years ago. Any involving falsified technical reports. Codename North Star. It wasn't a full investigation yet. Just the first glance from an authority that had the power to tear apart corporate empires. Maya sat in her tiny Queens apartment, staring at Robert Chen's email on her laptop screen. Her phone kept buzzing. She'd silenced it an hour ago, but the notifications kept piling up. She felt like she was standing at the edge of a cliff and someone was asking her to jump without knowing if there was water below or rocks. For 3 years, she'd been invisible. Safe in her invisibility, even if it hurt. Now, she was everywhere. Her story shared millions of times. Her name known by strangers. Her face, thankfully, still mostly private since the Chronicle had respected her privacy enough to not publish her photo. But visibility came with danger. Grant Blackwell was dangerous. Men like him didn't just accept public humiliation, they struck back. Maya thought about her father, about the stroke that had stolen his voice. She thought about her mother, working double shifts to keep them afloat. She thought about the 3 years she'd spent pouring wine for people who looked through her like she was glass. And then she thought about what her father used to tell her. Baby girl, the safest path isn't always the right path. Sometimes you have to step into the fire to forge something stronger. Maya opened a reply to Robert Chen's email. Her fingers hovered over the keyboard for a long moment. Then she typed, Mr. Chen, I need 48 hours to think, but I have one question. If I accept, can we work on getting my father's patents back? She hit send before she could second-guess herself. The reply came back in less than 15 minutes. That's exactly the kind of question I was hoping you'd ask. The answer is yes. Let's talk. At 1:40 p.m., Blackwell Capital released their official statement. It was everything you'd expect from a cornered corporation. Careful language, vague apologies, and a scapegoat. Blackwell Capital regrets the inappropriate language used by our representatives at a recent business dinner. We hold our team to the highest standards of professionalism and respect. Evan Parker's employment has been terminated effective immediately. We remain committed to ethical business practices. No mention of North Star, no mention of Richardson, no mention of falsified reports. The public reaction was swift and brutal. Weak apology. They're throwing the assistant under the bus while the real criminal stays safe. They apologized for inappropriate language, but not for destroying a man's company with lies. Notice what they didn't say. Grant Blackwell had made a critical mistake. He'd tried to control the narrative the way he'd always had, with money, lawyers, and carefully worded statements. But this time, the narrative was being written by millions of people who'd spent their lives being invisible, just like Maya, and they weren't buying it. By 2 p.m., several major investment firms quietly began reviewing their partnerships with Blackwell Capital. In the world of high finance, reputation isn't everything, but it's close, and Grant's reputation was burning. 2 days later, Maya walked into Phoenix Holdings' offices in Midtown. The building was modest compared to the glass and steel giants around it, clean, professional, but not trying to intimidate. The kind who was secure enough not to need the show. Robert Chen met her in the lobby himself. He was in his early 50s, Asian American with kind eyes and a firm handshake. Not the kind of power player who needed to prove he was important. The kind who was secure enough not to need the show. Miss Richardson, he said warmly, thank you for coming. He didn't start by asking about the Golden Table incident. He didn't treat her like a viral sensation or a curiosity. Instead, he asked about her unfinished dissertation from Heidelberg. You were studying the economic impact of clean water access on labor productivity in underserved communities, Robert said, pulling up her old research proposal on his tablet. This framework you built, measuring value beyond profit margins, this is exactly the kind of thinking we need. Maya felt something unfamiliar, being seen for her mind, not her moment of viral fame. Robert laid out his vision for the Ethical Innovation Initiative. We invest in technology that solves real problems without selling it sole for profit. Clean water, affordable housing, sustainable food systems. But we need someone to build the framework, to make sure we're not just talking about ethics, we're actually living it. He slid a folder across the desk. This is the charter. Independent Ethics Committee, whistleblower protections, quarterly transparency reports. I won't pretend it's perfect, but it's genuine. Maya read through the documents carefully. She'd learned not to trust words on paper, but these weren't empty promises. They were concrete structures, legal protections, real accountability measures. What's holding you back? Robert asked after she'd been quiet for several minutes.
Maya looked up, meeting his eyes directly. The fear that I'm just trading one gilded cage for another. Your world is still a fortress, Mr. Chen. Just different colored velvet on the chairs. Robert nodded slowly, not insulted. True, but here's the difference. You'd be the one holding the key. You'd have veto power over deals that compromise the mission. You'd build the framework that keeps us honest. He leaned forward. I'm not offering you a job as a token. I'm offering you the chance to do what your father couldn't finish. Get that water filtration technology out into the world, protected from people like Grant Blackwell. Maya felt tears prick her eyes. The patents! Our legal team is already looking into it. Blackwell's bleeding right now. His assets are toxic. Sometimes the best time to buy something back is when the seller is desperate to cut losses. Maya took a deep breath. She thought about her father, about the nights he'd spent reading German poetry to her, about his dream of bringing clean water to communities that had been forgotten. I'll do it, she said. But I have conditions. Robert smiled. I'd be disappointed if you didn't. Maya started at Phoenix Holdings the following Monday. Her first day, she walked into an empty conference room, an empty in a good way, a blank canvas. Her team was small but brilliant. Priya, an impact analysis specialist, Marcus, a product engineer with a background in sustainable design, and Elena, a lawyer who'd spent years working on human rights cases. They looked at Maya not as a viral celebrity, but as their boss, someone who'd earned her place through knowledge and courage. Maya hung a whiteboard chart on the wall. Ethical flow design. 1. Mission verification. 2. Technical due diligence. 3. Impact modeling. 4. Ethical criteria check. People, environment, transparency. 5. Capital structure, protecting the mission. 6. Responsible exit planning. Their first project? Vivian Dynamics. 2 young engineers had developed a biodegradable polymer to replace single-use plastics. The financials were shaky, the pitch deck rough, but the science was solid. Marcus tested the lab samples. Priya calculated waste reduction in pilot regions. Elena reviewed supply chains to ensure no labor exploitation. Maya's conclusion? Conditional investment. Mission clause in company charter. No sale of more than 25% to any fund not committed to ethical and social governance standards. Robert signed off immediately. Meanwhile, Phoenix's legal team began a different kind of chess game, tracing the water filtration patents. Part of the intellectual property was held by a shell company under Blackwell Capital. The rest was pledged to a bank as collateral. But Blackwell was hemorrhaging. Markets don't forgive reputational damage easily. Investors were pulling out. Assets that had once seemed valuable now felt radioactive. Elena drafted an offer. Buy back the patents at a fraction of their value. Cash payment immediate. No admission of liability clause included. Sometimes achieving an ethical goal meant speaking the language of pragmatism. The bank responded within 48 hours. Accepted. 3 weeks after Maya's confrontation at the Golden Table, Dr. Mark Peterson sat in a conference room with federal investigators. He'd made his choice: cooperate
or go down with the ship. Project North Star, he began, his voice heavy with shame, was designed to manufacture panic around Richardson Water Solutions. Grant Blackwell approached me 2 months before the acquisition. He offered me a board position at one of his portfolio companies and a significant consulting contract. In exchange for? In exchange for signing a long-term technical assessment that claimed Richardson's water filtration technology would fail within 5 years. The report was fiction. None of the data was real, but my signature gave it credibility. Pedersen's hands trembled. Dr. Richardson trusted me. We'd published papers together. When investors saw my name on that report, they believed it. The company's value collapsed within 2 weeks. And Grant Blackwell acquired the company? For almost nothing. Maybe 15% of its actual value. The investigator looked up. Are you willing to testify to this under oath? Pedersen nodded. Yes. I can't undo what I did, but I can tell the truth now. The news leaked by the end of the day, not from Pedersen or the investigators, but from someone in the building who recognized the implications. Evelyn Shaw's phone rang at 6 p.m. Her source spoke quickly. Pedersen's cooperating. North Star's confirmed. You were right. Evelyn's next article ran that night. Key witness confirms Blackwell Capital used falsified reports to tank Richardson Water Solutions. The markets opened the next morning with Blackwell Capital in free fall. Grant Blackwell's empire didn't collapse overnight. Empires never do. They crack slowly, like ice under rising temperatures, until one day the whole thing gives way. First, the board forced him to step down as CEO. Temporarily, the press release said. Everyone knew what that meant. Then the lawsuit started. Former business partners, investors, even some of his own executives trying to distance themselves from the sinking ship. The Securities and Exchange Commission opened a formal investigation into multiple acquisitions over the past decade, looking for patterns of manipulation and fraud. Evan Parker, the assistant who had been thrown overboard first, sat in his apartment watching the news coverage. Part of him felt vindicated. Grant was finally facing consequences. Part of him felt hollow. He'd been complicit. He'd laughed at those jokes in German, thinking he was untouchable. His phone buzzed. An email from an address he didn't recognize. The Water Commons Coalition is hiring supply chain coordinators. Not glamorous, low pay, real impact. If you're serious about starting over, here's the contact info. It wasn't signed, but Evan knew who'd sent it. He stared at the email for a long time before finally hitting reply. Thank you. I'll apply. 6 weeks after Maya's first day at Phoenix Holdings, Elena walked into her office with a smile. It's done, she said, placing a folder on Maya's desk. The patents are ours. Maya opened the folder with shaking hands. There it was, the Intellectual Property Transfer Agreement. Richardson's water filtration technology, now owned by Phoenix Holdings. But Maya had insisted on one more step. The trust? She asked. Elena nodded. Registered this morning. The Schmidt Water Trust, named after your father's middle name. Public trust with open licensing for nonprofit serving low-income communities. Any revenue generated gets reinvested in training local technicians. Maya felt tears sliding down her cheeks. He would have loved this. That weekend, Maya visited her father at the care facility. He was sitting in his wheelchair by the window, watching birds at the feeder outside. His right side was still weak, his speech still difficult, but his eyes were alert. Hi, Dad, Maya said, pulling up a chair beside him. She took his hand, the left one, the stronger one, and told him everything. About the golden table, about Robert Chen, about the patents coming home. Your technology is going back out into the world, she said softly. But this time it's protected. No one can steal it, no one can use it to get rich while people go thirsty. Her father's eyes filled with tears. He squeezed her hand hard, harder than the doctors thought he could. Proud, he managed to say, the word coming out rough but clear. So proud. Maya laid her head on his shoulder and cried. 3 months later, the first pilot project launched. Clear Start 01. The domestic pilot targeted a coastal county in North Carolina that had been hit hard by hurricane season. The water system was unreliable, contaminated in several areas, and the local government didn't have funding for major infrastructure upgrades. Phoenix Holdings partnered with the county health department, not as saviors swooping in, but as engineers working alongside the community. At Riverside Elementary School, 10 new filtration units were installed. Priya worked with the local clinic to track gastrointestinal illness rates over 6 months. She wasn't looking for miracles overnight. She wanted steady data, not headlines. In Kofi Village, West Africa, Maya traveled there herself with Marcus and Elena. They met with the local technicians, Ama, Kwame, and Yao. The training wasn't complicated corporate speak, it was practical. How often to backwash the system, how to monitor water quality without expensive sensors, how to maintain the equipment with locally available parts. When the first tap ran clear, Maya stepped back. She let Ama open the valve. She let Kwame check the flow. She let Yao sign the operation log. Children laughed and played nearby. The adults remained cautious. They'd seen too many promises dissolve like foam. "The data will answer," Priya said quietly to Maya. Maya nodded. "And ownership will keep it here." The news coverage was modest. A small item in the local paper, then a national outlet picked it up. Trust licenses clean water technology under open terms. No photo of Maya, no dramatic narrative, just the work speaking for itself. Exactly 6 months after the night of the confrontation, Maya made a reservation at the Golden Table, her first time entering through the front doors as a guest. Richard Dubois greeted her personally, his warm smile genuine. "We've kept the corner table for you." The restaurant was unchanged, burgundy velvet, crystal chandeliers, marble statue in the corner. But to Maya, everything had shifted. It was no longer a fortress keeping her out.
It was a space she could choose to enter or leave at will. Her server that night was a young black woman named Jasmine, nervous, eager, clearly new. Maya smiled gently. "I'll have the Dover sole with lemon butter, please. And take your time, you're doing great." Jasmine's shoulders relaxed slightly. "Thank you, ma'am." Dinner was simple. No speeches, no drama, just perfectly cooked fish and the satisfaction of a full circle moment. Midway through the meal, Maya noticed Richard walking toward her table. He was carrying a small envelope. "Something you left behind that night," he said, placing it on the table. Inside was a note in Chef Antoine's handwriting. "A glass of water for the one who stood in the right place." Maya smiled, tucked the note into her wallet, and looked around the room. At other tables, deals were still being made. Power still flowed through conversations. But Maya was no longer invisible here. She was no longer afraid. When Jasmine brought the check, Maya left a generous tip and a small note. "You did beautifully tonight. Remember, your breath guides your hands guide the floor. Keep going." As she walked out, Maya paused by the marble statue. She'd once wondered what stories it could tell if it could speak. Tonight, she didn't need it to say anything. Her story had already been told, and it was still being written, one clear tap of water at a time. The data from Riverside Elementary came back. Gastrointestinal illness rates among students had dropped by 47% compared to the same period the previous year. Priya didn't celebrate immediately. We need third-quarter data to rule out seasonal effects. But the numbers held. By month 9, the reduction was consistent. Clear, measurable impact. In Kofi Village, Ama sent a photo. Children lining up with empty bottles waiting for their turn at the community tap. Clean water. Free water. Water that belonged to the community, not to investors at Ocean Away. Marcus replied in their group chat. "Don't forget the backwash schedule this week." Their language wasn't English or German or any spoken tongue. It was the language of process, steady, correct, patient. Meanwhile, the investigation into Blackwell Capital concluded. Grant Blackwell agreed to a settlement, fines, restitution to affected companies, and a permanent ban from serving as an officer or director of any publicly traded company. He'd escaped criminal charges by cooperating at the last minute and paying massive penalties. But his empire was gone, his reputation destroyed. His name would forever be associated with fraud and manipulation.
Evan Parker finished his first year at the Water Commons Coalition. Nobody there knew who he used to be. They just knew him as the quiet guy in the warehouse who made sure valves and gaskets got to the right places on time. It wasn't glamorous, but it was honest work. And some nights, lying in bed, Evan felt something he hadn't felt in years. Peace. 1 year after that night at the Golden Table, Maya stood in front of a college auditorium, invited to speak at her alma mater, MIT. The students looked at her with curiosity. Some knew her story from the viral news coverage. Others just knew she was doing something interesting with ethical investment and clean water technology. "I'm going to tell you something they don't teach in business school," Maya began. "Power isn't about having the loudest voice or the most money. Real power is knowing when to speak and what to say when everyone expects you to stay silent." She paused, letting that sink in. "A year ago, I was invisible. I served food to people who looked through me like I was glass. And for a long time, I thought that invisibility was survival. I thought keeping my head down and collecting my paycheck was the smart thing to do. But invisibility comes with a cost. It costs you your dignity, your voice, your sense of self. And eventually, you start to forget that you ever had those things to begin with." A student raised her hand. "What made you finally speak up?" Maya smiled. "I heard something I couldn't unhear. These men were laughing about destroying my father's life's work, and they thought I was too stupid to understand. They used a different language because they believed I was invisible. But here's what they didn't know. Invisible doesn't mean powerless. Sometimes being underestimated is the greatest advantage you can have." Another student spoke up. "Were you scared?" Maya admitted, "Terrified. I knew I might lose my job. I knew I might make things worse. But I also knew that if I stayed silent, I'd lose something more important: my ability to look at myself in the mirror." She took a breath. "Here's the lesson I want you to take away. Speaking truth to power doesn't always look dramatic. It doesn't always go viral. Sometimes it's just showing up every day and doing the right thing, even when nobody's watching. Sometimes it's building systems that protect people instead of exploiting them. Sometimes it's choosing the harder path because it's the right path. My father used to tell me, the safest path isn't always the right path. He was right. Playing it safe kept me small. Speaking up made me free." The auditorium was silent. "So, my challenge to you is this. Don't wait until you're powerful to start doing the right thing. Do the right thing, and you'll discover you were powerful all along." The students erupted in applause. After the talk, a young black woman approached Maya. "Thank you," she said quietly. "I'm working as a barista right now to pay for school, and sometimes I feel like I'm invisible too. Your story reminded me that I'm not." Maya squeezed her hand. "You're not invisible. You never were. Some people just need their eyes opened." That night, Maya returned to her apartment. Bigger now, in a better neighborhood, but still modest. She sat at her desk and opened her father's old economics textbook. On the inside cover, she wrote a new inscription. "For everyone who has ever felt invisible, you are seen. You matter. Your voice has power. Use it." She closed the book and looked out the window at the Manhattan skyline, glowing in the darkness. Somewhere in that city, a young server was pouring wine for people who didn't see them. Somewhere, a brilliant mind was being wasted because someone had told them they weren't good enough. Somewhere, someone was choosing between speaking up and staying safe. Maya hoped they'd choose courage, because she'd learned something important. Changing the world doesn't always require wealth or fame or connections. Sometimes it just requires one person willing to say, "I see you. I hear you. What you did was wrong, and I'm not going to stay silent anymore." That's the power of speaking truth. That's the power of refusing to be invisible. That's the power that belongs to all of us, if we're brave enough to use it. Maya's story teaches us that dignity cannot be bought or sold. Power doesn't come from money or position. It comes from knowing your worth and refusing to accept less than you deserve. When you're invisible to others, It's easy to become invisible to yourself. But invisibility is an illusion. You are always seen by God, by the universe, by the people who truly matter. Speaking truth to power requires courage, but silence requires something far more costly: your soul. Maya chose courage. She chose truth. She chose herself. And in doing so, she changed not just her own life, but the lives of countless people who would drink clean water because of her father's technology. Technology that almost died in the shadows, but was brought back into the light. The question is, when your moment comes, what will you choose? If this story moved you, inspire someone else by sharing it. Drop a comment telling me what lesson you're taking away from Maya's journey. And subscribe to this channel for more powerful stories about ordinary people doing extraordinary things. Remember, you are never invisible. Your voice matters. Your story matters. Use it wisely. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next story.